connected experience is all about knowing your customer in a way that is not done in the traditional manner. That means you are looking at not just the data that is available with you, but also the activities that one performs in conjunction with data that you have, and using technology to enable this in a seamless manner. And making sure that the privacy of the customer is respected at all times. And this is what I think is the definition of a connected experience. And we have gone through the multiple eras of how this experience was translated and communicated. So I would like to understand, according to you, what is connected experience?
Well, I think your definition is perfectly dead on, that it's not just sending out messages as sort of one direction, but really interacting with the customer continuously, responding in the way a person would respond in a conversation, to listen to what they're saying, respond to that, listen to their response to your response, and keep adjusting that, which is a more natural approach. That's the way people kind of expect to interact with other people. And nowadays, since almost all of our communications are digital anyway, whether we're interacting with a person via text or whatever technique, or we're interacting with a company, we almost can't tell. Either way, it's something on the other end of the screen, right? Occasionally there's a face-to-face interaction, but most of the time it's actually digital. So we just expect that interaction to be this sort of human-like interaction, regardless of whether or not it's actually with another human. And I think the other thing that's very important is adjusting to context, which traditional marketing didn't do, because traditional marketing simply wasn't aware that, oh, this person is at home, this person is at work, this person is traveling in a country that's not their normal country, and you get very different needs and very different interests depending on the context of the individual. And that also has to get factored into the connected experience.
I think you touched upon a very important piece of how context becomes the king in terms of communication. I think there were attempts made based on intent, right? But intent is more esoteric than the context itself. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very nice way of putting it. So, Susan, in your opinion, how does privacy affect this whole thing?
It's interesting because the way I see it relating to context, for one thing is, you think about our relationship we used to have with the company was, there were people involved, right? So you could develop trust in a certain way because you were interacting with a person sometimes. And I think now, part of the situation with automation is there's that step back. It's like, who are we relating to? And how do I trust it in terms of privacy? Like, why should I trust, in essence, we talk about AI or things like that, why should I trust a machine, that's impersonal to start with? And so I think that it's putting companies in a situation where you have to think about, how can I establish trust when, from a person's point of view, they're not even sure who they're connecting with. And I think privacy is very tough right now. And I think people are quick to step back and say, I don't need to engage with this place. I've got lots of choices. There are many other places to go.
That's a very nice observation in terms of how you have to first earn the trust. Second one is, how do you differentiate yourself? The third one is, how does that differentiation manifest in your communication? I think all three are important. Mm-hmm. And one has to really, it's not magic. It is a process. So one needs to know where they are, where they want to go, how they want to go. So that is important. So, blaming a technology or, saying I've already invested in something doesn't matter. But the ability for you to really take this experience to the next level and learning from it, how does the customer really respond to it, is the whole meaning of connected experience, in my opinion.
Well, I think a lot of brands and companies look at it as simply something they have no choice but to do. They see it as something that consumers expect from them. You know, the leading companies, the Amazons of the world, have set a very high bar. And consumers, of course, don't know that anything is hard. They just think these things happen. So they think if Amazon can do it, why can't everyone else give me the same level of experience? You and I know there's a lot of reasons, but from the consumer's perspective, it's like, they must not care enough. This is usually the consumers, or they just think that the company is not very well run. And we run into this constantly in our own lives, right? All of us do. So I think that really companies have to be very sensitive to customer expectations, because in reality, you can't deliver everything. So you have to decide, what can I deliver? What's most important to my customer? And what can I make sure that I deliver that first? And then let me see what else I can deliver second and third and fourth. So you have to begin to prioritize. And the other thing to bear in mind is, of course, the customers are different. This comes back to that connected experience. Some customers are very privacy focused, and they want one level of interaction. Other customers are much more focused on service, and they'll share anything they want if they think they're going to get a better result or even just a better price. So you really have to build up that personal profile of the individual. So you give them the experience that they want, not just the kind of statistically average experience that the average customer wants. And that's a difficult thing to do, but companies have to do it. If they don't meet that level of expectation, or even if they, as I say, deliver a sort of average experience that's the same for one, then the people at this end or that end of the spectrum who didn't want the average experience, who wanted more privacy or less privacy, say, will leave. They'll go someplace else. So we really have to accommodate people, whatever it is that they want, and that requires a great deal of investment.
I think this is very similar to education, right? In the classroom, what happens is the teachers are either teaching to the lowest comprehensible student or the superstars. Yeah. Both of them are bad, because that affects, if you're going to look at the lowest common denominator, you're going to lose the interest of the others. Whereas if you're going to only be concentrating on superstars, the rest of them will be gone. So ability for making sure that you're doing the right focus at the right segment is important. I think that's one key thing. Second one is, why technology, right? Depending upon which industry you are in, you might have to have different types of interventions. In retail, mostly everyone is talking about e-commerce based applications or websites, or ability to capture certain amount of efficiency in the ad world. Whereas if you're going to look at a bank, that is depending upon transactions. So ability to engineer this will have to be really thought through. One size doesn't fit all, right? If I try to emulate Amazon, I don't think it's going to help somebody else, right? Amazon, being Amazon, has certain important things. Like, for example, I love Amazon's, Kindle, because it knows my reading habits. It is able to give me the right cue, right suggestions at the right time. It's not intrusive. It is a suggestion. If they're trying to sell me or sell me a lot of things because I read a book of adventure, then they sell me adventure travel, I will hate them. I think connected experience has to be set into that context, which you very clearly articulated. And the technology has to be there to enable this context without intruding. I think these two are very important.
And you look at even in Amazon, they're not doing so well in grocery retail. They're struggling hugely. So it's not like, and I don't really think it's because they simply try to duplicate in a physical grocery store the way they do things online, but there's a kind of, they have a culture, as every company does. And I think that culture is not really translated well. So it's not just even that the leaders do it all right. You really have to adapt.
Their foray into connected experience is decade old when they introduced Alexa. Because Alexa was initially assistance where you can talk about, what do you want as a list, and then you can send a consolidated or offer, right? Instead of it being written on the wall, they had a specialist device which took down notes like I want a dozen eggs, etc., etc. And then it got hijacked to a large extent that a fridge is now looking at whether I have enough, eggs for tomorrow, and it is setting an order automatically. That is the next level of connected experience. Maybe it will happen, but is that relevant and required today? Is a key question, right?
And the consumers want, because there have been much research on whether people want that automated replenishment, and most consumers will tell you they don't. They want to make those choices. Because Alexa doesn't know that we're going to leave for 3 weeks on vacation tomorrow. We don't really want you to restock.
Unless they're connected to your calendar. I saw one of the connected experience video, which was very scary. So, like for example, I'm coming from my office home. So my assistant knows that the temperature is 4 degrees more than usual. So it has already started my aircon in my home. Then it also realized that I had so many meetings, I'm very stressful. So it ordered food for me automatically. And then it knew that I always eat Chinese on a Thursday. So it ordered Chinese food. So these kind of things are very good in terms of stories. But humans are very different, right? Our preferences change like a weather. So you can't cohort me. I think that's one of the key things. In connected experience, one has to know that the context can be derived, but it is a hypothesis, not a fact.
Exactly.
So I think this is one of the things I learned in terms of designing connected experiences. So you need to be subservient to a customer, not trying to be smart about that.
I think the most interesting development in the CDP world right now is the componentization of CDPs, breaking them up into bits. And that's the antithesis of what the CDP was supposed to be. So it's a little bit of pain to even admit that, right? Because the CDPs exist because people wanted to buy one system that would get all their customer data in one place and make it available. They didn't want to have to try to build a system to do that themselves. But now what we see is that even though I still think a lot of companies would prefer to buy a single system, there's so much data out there that you can't bring it all into the CDP. So we now see CDPs, even if they're fundamentally integrated CDPs, that are accessing other data stores in real time. So read the inventory system in real time, read the local weather in real time, read the market conditions, the traffic conditions, whatever it is that's relevant. You're not going to import all that information. It doesn't make any sense. It changes too rapidly. But the CDP is now beginning to have those real-time connectors, which very ironically was at one point thought to be the antithesis of the CDP. There were a lot of vendors when the CDP was younger who said, we don't need to build a separate database. We're just going to go out and access all that data in real time. Well, that doesn't work either. There's certain data that you do have to pull in and work with. So if you want to get historical information, talk about building these customer profiles. You don't want to regenerate the customer profile every time you want to do something with the customer. You need that data to be pre-analyzed and pre-assembled. But the other data that doesn't have to be imported in advance, you do so that there's a sort of that's probably the biggest thing that we see on that end. We see much more focus on identity resolution, because that again comes into the connected experience. You want to recognize the same customer no matter where they appear, and you want to be able to pull in all their information and unify it so that your profile is as rich as possible, so you can make the most well-informed decisions that are possible. Of course, you have to connect with more and more external systems at the other end, because there's so many more ways to deliver messages, and those are real-time connections. And that's another big issue, is making sure that your real-time data collection and interaction management are truly in real time. Many CDPs have always done the message selection decisioning of what's the right next action or the right next offer or whatever the right next thing is to do, and that's getting better. Of course, the AI is playing into that and making that easier in some ways. Privacy, of course, is increasingly important for the CDP and compliance, and and giving customers a sense of control, getting back to the earlier discussion about not having the system tell you what, oh yes, you're having Chinese food tonight. It's like, well, no, give me a choice. You know? Ask me if I want Chinese food tonight. Be ready, you know, if it's yes, but don't assume that you know me better than I do, that I know myself. That doesn't work. So there's always a good deal of that going on as well.
So I think this is a very important piece, as you said. You know, it's the same discussion we had between CRM, data warehouse, and the data lake, right? Data lake is supposed to capture everything raw, and then you need multiple front ends depending upon the type of user they'll consume it through that front end, right? So CDP has come to a stage where you need to define what you want to know about the customer, but you need to have additional intelligence or connections to know the context. I think again this is connected, right? You are going to be looking at weather data, and you don't want to store weather data in your database. It's going to be simply useless, right? You're not going to segment based on weather data. Maybe you're going to have averages that are being available somewhere so that you can plan for your Christmas, for example. Is it going to be a white Christmas this year? We don't know, but you're not going to store such predictions on yours. So it's very important for CDPs to play the role of what do you want to know about your customer, what do you want to know about their patterns, nothing more, nothing less. And after that, you're efficiently doing decisioning of what to offer and how to learn whether that offer is accepted, rejected. So they're not imposing anything, they're giving just an option. I think that's very key. So CDP is now rising to the challenge by making sure that you have a flexible model in terms of how you can bring the data in and how you can refer external sources in real time. I think this is very key for evolution, and probably over a period it will become so good that you can create different pipes. Like, for example, one example I had was with a bank. They wanted to do a quick time decision. When somebody swipes a card, I actually get to know the transaction. Can I take an action based on whatever else is available? Like, for example, the limit is now becoming close to zero. I can immediately offer to do a temporary credit limit increase for them because they are sitting in the mall and probably they will buy more. This is where I think the CDP data is important, but it has to be contextualized, connected to the intent, purpose, and the fulfillment. I think this is very important for a CDP to play that role.
Yeah. And it also has to be connected, just to think about your wall example, to other systems, because it may be that increasing the credit would be a risk, but perhaps the mall owner would accept that risk. So you go out to the mall and say, hey, this customer's in your mall right now, they're reaching their credit limit, will you pay X to buy some insurance that they can take on?
Exactly.
Right? But now you have to connect to their system, right? And they have to make all kinds of crazy calculations
Exactly.
to decide whether to accept that offer or
So
not.
I think the easiest way in that was the credit scores are not changing every second.
Right.
But the intent are changing. So you want to do two things. One is de-risk yourself. At the same time, provide that option. Right? You're not increasing the credit limit automatically. But just because somebody has bought something and they're close to a zero credit limit, you are giving them an option which can be instantly, attainable.
Well, maturity on a number of levels, right? Certainly the technological maturity of the brand, the marketing maturity of the brand, very likely the management maturity of the brand. Those are all things that factor into this, because if you don't have everything at the right level of maturity, then you do something technically advanced because you can, but your marketers don't know what to do with it, which is unfortunately already very common.
It's like Apple releasing Newton.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The only place we saw that was in a movie where Steven Seagal will be using it to communicate.
Right, for about 2 minutes there, we thought that was going to work. Exactly, yeah, so, and of course, because the technology drives it, and the technology keeps getting better and smarter and more advanced. Everyone else is actually kind of, chasing to catch up, really. So how do we get our marketers trained? And not just our marketers, but everyone throughout the company trained to take advantage of these things. So they don't go out and create a million AI models that are, 99% of which are actually useless, but, they're easy to build, so we just build them, the marketers are excited. Or as I say, the managers who have to adapt reward systems, and they have to adapt organizational structures. They actually, somewhat ironically, have to delegate more authority to individual human workers to make decisions that are appropriate when the systems really can't make a good judgment. That's a big change for the managers of companies. So they all have to keep moving and advancing their maturity level. But in any given moment, companies need to be fairly realistic about what they are capable of as an organization across all those different kinds of resources, and do what you can do, and don't try to do something that will fail. Because if you try to do something that's too advanced and fails, it just hurts you, and it damages your brand with the consumer, which of course is the real problem. Because if I waste money, okay, I waste money. Probably I can afford as a company to waste whatever I wasted. It was a really huge bet. And that's really not that big a deal. But if I get the customers mad at me, that's much more damaging in the long run than almost any wasted expense.
I think, to summarize what you articulated, maturity is to be measured at different levels. One is technological maturity, whether you can handle it, whether that is going to yield right results. You have enough skills. Second one is change management of the organization. Is that based on a design? It should not be random, right? One has to have an intent. So there are only three things. One is intent. Second one is commonality in terms of how you want to, execute that. The third one is a benefit. All three has to be aligned. Otherwise, change seldom gets done in an organization. The third most important thing is ability to provide that distributed authority in terms of decision support. How they will be able to set a hypothesis, learn from it. There may be mistakes, but how does that mistake not hurting anyone, right? It should be in such a way that, when I do something with the customer and the customer does not like it, it should not be looked at as a bad thing. It is simply that an organization learning from you. So, the old way of looking at customers' brand perception was always through saying, how did this interaction go? Will you recommend this to your friends and family? So, on a scale of 1 to 10. The actual fact is, I actually had a very good interaction with the person who designed this. He said, at that time, it was very useful because if you are doing anything less than 6, that means you're a detractor. 6 to 8, you're neutral. 8 to 10, you're the promoter. So, the way in which they designed the system was 0 to 6, discard them. Don't even bother. And the example he gave was very good. It was about Apple. Why Apple is so successful? Because it doesn't sell to detractors. There are so many people who hate Apple. They don't even sell to them. So that's it, period. They're only looking at people who are promoting it. And due course, the guys who are neutral becomes a promoter. And that's it. The moment you start, building connected relationship with people who hate you, you're doomed for failure. So I think realizing that itself is a big aspect. And that you can see from the data, right? It's based on one-off transactions that one may make. Second one is the number of complaints that you receive from such segment of people. So you start eliminating that and start servicing who wants your service or your product. I think that's very key.
it has a lot to do with you're trying to have a long-term relationship. So it's not the individual transaction, it's the long-term relationship. And I think privacy very much goes to all of that concern. And I think that's what the decision is on individuals' part, is that they're thinking, who do I want to have a relationship with and why? And how will I be treated? And that's why I think privacy is kind of, for lack of a better way of looking at it, kind of an indicator of how someone may feel about you. And it's an area to watch from my point of view.
Also, when you're selecting the technologies, you have to be very clear that hacking can happen. If it happens, you're not losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the simplest analogy that I had. When I designed the systems, I always made sure that if somebody downloads everything, they have nothing. They can't make sense out of it because it is so anonymized. So it's very difficult for somebody to make sense out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So ability to keep the PIIs, different, and the other parts different. Only when you bring them together, you are able to, solve the puzzle. Making that with a clear air gap is an important part in privacy.
Yeah.
And that's another key aspect that I saw, with so much of data coming into CDP. CDP customer is gold today.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can get Flipkart's data 100%, then I'm actually can target, cheaper products, to them, right? So a brand loses itself. So I think this is a very key area.
I think the most important thought, honestly, is that it's a moving target. That customer expectations will continue to grow and evolve. Things like privacy and trust and control become more and more important. So it's not just a matter of personalizing and predicting and understanding what they want. It's also a matter of treating them respectfully as autonomous beings who have needs that you're never going to anticipate. So you want to make available to them the resources of your company to give them the best experience that you can, but also to let them have control over that experience and recognize that they have control over that experience so they feel good about it. And that will ultimately end up with the best relationship that you can build.
Yeah. I think in some level too, I think people want to make sure that they're seen as individuals, and I think they're going to fight hard about that. So as much as the company seems to know about them or any of the rest of it, I think that and it's not ornery, but you just don't want to be quite so predictable, and you don't want to think that somebody knows everything about you. You want to be you. And if you have to change who you are to make sure that you have the autonomy and you're an individual, you might just do that.
I agree with you. So I think that's a whole funky part, right? Like, for example, I'm very loyal to airline or a hotel. My expectation from them is to know everything about me, right? The seats, my meal preference, my room preference, etc. Whereas if I'm going to e-commerce, I don't want them to be, selling things that they think I want. So there is a distinct line between what I'm expecting in each type of service and brand that I'm looking for. As an individual, it also can differ, right? So like a meal preference is vital in a plane. If you're doing 18 hours and you're a vegetarian and you're not given in Korean Airlines, you're done. So I think this is a very interesting thought, and thank you very much for contributing your thoughts. And, together we can make things better. And thanks again for CDP Institute for giving us a kind of a unified force in terms of looking at the crystal, giving the knowledge based on the other side, which is the customer, right? So the outside in is a very important area. That's how we started working in this line itself. So how do you make people trust us? How do you make people to be loyal to us? How do you make people to make more transactions with us? On the other hand, how do you, as a brand, give them the best satisfaction? How do we give them the best options available? How do we not tell them that we can do something which we can't? I think that's the overall thing. I think this is a good learning. As you said, it's a journey and there is no destination. So we'll be talking about something different in probably a year's time. So, we all have to be on our heels to serve better. That's it. Thank you.
So, thank you.